A group of rowdy rebels threatened a quiet hunting guide at a remote fishing marina, but they never expected to cross paths with a former Special Forces survival expert, whose intervention would expose a multi-million-dollar poaching ring and bring down one of the most dangerous wildlife trafficking operations in the Northwest. Just before we dive back into it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode about a park ranger who took down an entire crime syndicate is one you definitely won't want to miss. The morning mist hung heavy over Pine Creek Marina, wrapping the weathered docks in a ghostly shroud. Jake Harrison sat in his usual spot on the covered deck of the Rusty Hook bait shop, watching his coffee steam rise and disappear into the fog, while the first rays of sunlight struggled to pierce the thick northwestern clouds. After 15 years of classified missions in the world's most unforgiving environments, training elite military units in survival skills, all he wanted now was the quiet solitude of guiding hunting and fishing expeditions in this remote corner of the wilderness. Linda Murphy, who'd run the Rusty Hook for over 2 decades, approached with a fresh pot of coffee in her weathered hands. "You're looking far too serious for such a beautiful morning," she said, topping off his cup. Her kind smile reminded Jake of his grandmother, who'd taught him everything he knew about tracking before his military days. Linda had no idea about the nightmares that still haunted him, or why he always chose the corner table with the clearest view of both the dock entrance and the emergency exit. The peaceful morning shattered as 3 massive pickup trucks roared into the marina's gravel parking lot, their engines deliberately gunned to announce their arrival. The handful of early morning fishermen preparing their boats tensed visibly, conversations dying mid-sentence. Linda's smile faltered as she gripped the coffee pot tighter. Jake observed the Red Wolf Rebels' distinctive wolf skull emblem on their truck doors as they parked, noting how the other patrons suddenly became intensely interested in their tackle boxes and fishing gear. Marcus Mad Dog Reynolds led the way, his scarred face twisted into what he probably thought was a charming smile as he surveyed the bait shop. His lieutenants, Tommy the Tank Thompson and Eric Snake Eyes Peterson, flanked him as they entered, all 3 men moving with the exaggerated confidence of predators who'd never met a real one. Mad Dog's gaze lingered on Jake for a moment too long before turning to Linda, his voice carrying an edge that made several patrons look away. "Linda, sweetheart," he called out. "Missed you at the Marina Council meeting last night. Harbor Master Richards was real disappointed." Linda's hands trembled slightly as she set down the coffee pot. "Had inventory to do, Marcus. You know how it is in peak season." Her voice carried a forced lightness that didn't reach her eyes. Sure, Mad Dog replied, moving closer to the counter. His heavy boots echoed on the wooden floor. "But see, when the harbor master calls a meeting, it's not really optional. He's trying to help this marina grow, make it more profitable. He needs everyone's support." His massive hand came down hard on the counter, making the coffee cups rattle and Linda flinch. Jake watched the exchange silently, his coffee forgotten. Years of training kicked in as he cataloged details with practiced precision. Thompson carried a concealed knife in his boot, poorly hidden beneath his jeans. Peterson's jacket bulged slightly on the right side, amateur mistake for a shoulder holster. Their confident postures suggested they were used to intimidation working, but their sloppy weapon discipline told him they'd never faced serious resistance. "Maybe," Linda said, her voice stronger now, surprising even herself. "The harbor master should focus on running the marina instead of letting criminals dictate policy." The bait shop went dead silent. Even the gentle lapping of waves against the dock seemed to pause. Mad Dog's fake smile vanished, replaced by something ugly and predatory. "What did you just say to me, old woman?" he growled, reaching across the counter. Jake moved before conscious thought took over. 15 years of Special Forces training kicked in as he grabbed Mad Dog's wrist, applying precise pressure to nerve clusters that made his fingers spasm open. "She said," Jake spoke softly, but his voice carried throughout the silent shop, "that the harbor master should do his job." Mad Dog tried to pull away, but Jake's grip was iron. Thompson moved to flank him, but Jake remained focused on Mad Dog. "Let go of me," Mad Dog snarled, "or my boys here will make you regret it." Jake smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Will they? Because from where I'm standing, you've got 3 choices. He increased pressure slightly, making Mad Dog wince. 1. You and your friends leave now, and we forget this happened. 2. You try something stupid and I send all 3 of you to the emergency room. Or 3. He applied a fraction more pressure, causing Mad Dog to drop to one knee. We find out just how many bones I can break before you hit the floor. You have no idea who you're messing with, Mad Dog spat through gritted teeth. Actually, I do, Jake replied. Marcus Mad Dog Reynolds, dishonorable discharge from the Army in 19. You and the Red Wolf Rebels have been running protection rackets up and down the Northwest waterways, but lately you've moved up to something bigger. Did I miss anything? The color drained from Mad Dog's face. Thompson's hand moved toward his concealed weapon, but Jake's voice stopped him cold. I wouldn't. Your draw is slow and you telegraph your intentions like an amateur. By the time you clear leather, this will be over. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the gentle creak of the dock and Mad Dog's labored breathing. Then Mad Dog raised his free hand in surrender. All right, we're leaving. But this isn't over. Jake released him, stepping back to give them space to exit. It can be. That's up to you. The 3 men backed away, their attempts to look menacing undermined by the way Mad Dog nursed his wrist. As they mounted their trucks, Mad Dog shot one last glare through the window. Who are you? You okay, honey? Linda whispered as the trucks roared away. Jake sat back down, taking a sip of his now cold coffee. Just someone who's seen enough bullies for one lifetime. But as he watched the Red Wolf Rebels disappear into the morning mist, he knew Mad Dog was right about one thing. This wasn't over. He'd just painted a target on his back, and if his instincts were correct, the protection racket was just the tip of the iceberg. The Red Wolf Rebels were part of something much bigger, something that reached far beyond this remote marina. Linda placed a fresh cup of coffee in front of him, along with a plate of her famous blueberry pancakes. Whatever happens next, the older woman said firmly, you're not alone. Jake nodded, already running through scenarios in his mind. He'd chosen this marina looking for peace, but sometimes peace had to be fought for. And if it was a fight the Red Wolf Rebels wanted, they were about to learn why Special Forces survival experts were the last people you wanted as enemies. No, Jake agreed quietly, pulling out his phone to make a call he'd hoped never to make again. I'm not alone, and neither are you. Not anymore. Late that evening, Jake sat in his small cabin overlooking the marina, methodically cleaning his Sig Sauer P320 with practiced precision. The encounter with the Red Wolf Rebels played over in his mind as he considered his next move. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. It's open, Sheriff, he called out, not looking up from his work. Sheriff Kate Morgan stepped inside, her weathered face betraying concern beneath her broad-brimmed hat. Word travels fast in small marinas. Heard you had a run-in with Marcus and his boys. News to me, Jake replied, reassembling his weapon with fluid movements. I just had a friendly chat with some customers who were being impolite. Morgan sighed, settling into a chair across from him. Look, Harrison, she started. Jake, he corrected. I know about your background. When you moved here 8 months ago, I ran a check. 15 years in Special Forces, multiple commendations, missions, so classified even my law enforcement clearance couldn't access them. Jake finally looked up, meeting her gaze. Then you know I can handle myself. That's what worries me. Morgan leaned forward, lowering her voice. The Red Wolf Rebels aren't just some local gang anymore. They've got connections, deep ones. Last month, my deputy found a suspicious shipment at the North Dock. Exotic animal parts, the kind that fetch millions on the black market. Before we could investigate, orders came down from the state level to back off. Sounds like someone's being paid to look the other way, Jake observed. Morgan nodded grimly. Harbor Master Richards holds meetings at the Red Wolf Clubhouse. Half the marina board suddenly drives new vehicles they shouldn't be able to afford. The Port Authority mysteriously has funding for extensive renovations. She paused, running a hand through her graying hair. I've got a teenage daughter, Jake. I can't risk. So, you turn a blind eye, Jake finished for her. I do what I can without getting my people killed. Morgan stood, adjusting her gun belt. I'm not here to tell you what to do. Just be careful. Marcus isn't the real power in the Red Wolf Rebels. His boss, Victor Cross, is coming to town next week. The man's got connections to wildlife trafficking operations across 3 continents. Jake's expression remained neutral, but his mind was racing. Cross was a name he'd heard before, during his last mission with Special Forces, an operation that had gone sideways, costing the lives of 2 of his teammates. Thanks for the warning, Sheriff. As Morgan reached the door, she paused. For what it's worth, Linda Murphy's good people. Been serving coffee and pancakes in this marina since I was a kid. What you did today. Well, it's about time someone stood up for her. After Morgan left, Jake pulled out his phone, dialing a number he hadn't used in months. Anderson speaking. Mike, it's Harrison. Remember that trafficking operation we tracked in Myanmar? The one that got Wilson and Martinez killed? A pause. The one that got away? Yeah. I think I found his supply chain. Pine Creek Marina, of all places. Christ, Jake, you're supposed to be retired. I need everything you can get me on Victor Cross and the Red Wolf Rebels. Official channels only. I don't want to burn any of your backdoor sources. Mike sighed. Give me 48 hours. And Jake, be careful. Cross isn't someone you want to tangle with alone. Who said I'm alone? The next morning, Jake was helping Linda open the bait shop when a group of motorcycles roared past. Not Red Wolf Rebels this time. Their leather cuts displayed a different insignia, the Mountain Rangers. Their leader, a massive man known as Granite, caught Jake's eye as they passed. There was recognition there, and something else, a message. More trouble? Linda asked, her voice weary. Maybe not, Jake replied. The Mountain Rangers were different, former military mostly, many of them special forces like himself. They protected their territory but didn't prey on civilians. And if Jake's instincts were right, they might be potential allies. His phone buzzed. A text from Mike. Data coming through. Cross definitely your guy. Got coordinates for multiple wildlife storage facilities. Also, local intel suggests Mountain Rangers MC might be enemy of your enemy. Jake smiled. Things were falling into place. The morning crowd started filtering in, regulars who'd witnessed yesterday's confrontation. They nodded to Jake with newfound respect. Word had spread. Someone had finally stood up to the Red Wolf Rebels. Around noon, Deputy Sarah Chen entered, making a beeline for Jake's usual table. Got something you need to see, she said quietly, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Jake reviewed the photos inside, surveillance footage from the marina's north dock, Red Wolf members overseeing cargo containers being moved at night, professional security teams that didn't match the gang's usual muscle, documentation with very official-looking stamps. When? Jake asked, studying the images. Last night. And here's the thing. They're getting sloppy, scared. Marcus has his people watching this place, watching you, but they're not being subtle about it. Jake had noticed. 2 Red Wolf prospects had been parked across the lot all morning, trying too hard to look casual. Your boss know you're showing me this? Sarah Chen smiled grimly. Kate's a good sheriff, but she's scared. Me? I'm tired of watching these bastards destroy our community. Linda was there for me when my dad died. Made sure I had hot meals and a place to study for the academy. I've got her back, same as you. Jake studied the young deputy. There was steel in her spine, fire in her eyes. Another potential ally. Be careful, Jake warned. If they realize you're helping me, I can handle myself, Chen cut him off. And I'm not the only one who's had enough. As if on cue, the rumble of motorcycles approached again. The Mountain Rangers were back, this time pulling into the marina's lot. Granite dismounted first, his massive frame filling the doorway of the Rusty Hook as he entered. His eyes scanned the room before settling on Jake. Mind if we join you? He asked, his voice a deep rumble that commanded attention. Deputy Chen tensed, but Jake nodded as Granite and 3 of his officers slid into the booth. Linda appeared with coffee, seemingly unfazed by the new arrivals. After she left, Granite leaned forward. Heard you had words with Marcus. Man's got a reputation for holding grudges. Is that why you're here? To warn me? Jake asked, studying the bikers closely. Granite chuckled, the sound like rocks in a tumbler. No, brother. We're here because the Red Wolves are moving contraband through our territory without permission. Exotic animals, endangered species, the kind of cargo that gets people killed. He glanced at Chen, who stood her ground. We thought you might be interested in a conversation about mutual interests. Jake leaned back, studying the bikers. Their posture, the way they carried themselves, definitely military backgrounds. And unlike the Red Wolves, they looked him in the eye with respect, not challenge. I'm listening. Granite glanced at Deputy Chen again. Deputy Chen stays, Jake said firmly. She's part of this. Fair enough. Granite nodded, his massive shoulders relaxing slightly. Cross is coming to oversee a major shipment, something big enough that Marcus has his people running scared. We've got intel, manpower, and motivation. What we need is someone who knows how to run an op like this. Someone with special forces training. You hear a lot in a small marina, Jake observed. Military folks, word gets around. Granite's voice softened slightly. I knew Wilson. He was a good man. The mention of Jake's fallen teammate hung in the air. After a moment, Jake spoke. If we do this, we do it my way. Clean, precise, by the book, no cowboy stuff. Wouldn't have it any other way, Captain. As the mountain rangers left, Chen let out a breath she'd been holding. You sure about this? Jake watched the bikers mount up through the window. The two Red Wolf prospects across the lot were frantically making phone calls. No, he admitted, but sometimes you have to work with the devil you know to take down the one you don't. The pieces were moving now. Cross was coming, bringing with him whatever operation had Marcus so nervous. The mountain rangers were on board, and Chen represented a potential link to legitimate law enforcement. Now all Jake needed was a plan that wouldn't get everyone killed. Night had fallen over the small marina when Jake's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Mike. He opened the file to find detailed satellite imagery of 3 locations around the marina, warehouses registered to shell companies but clearly serving as Red Wolf storage facilities. A knock at his cabin door interrupted his analysis. Linda stood there, looking nervous but determined. You've got visitors, Linda whispered. In the back lot. They say they're friends of yours. Jake grabbed his Sig Sauer, following Linda down the path. In the shadowy lot, he found Granite and his sergeant-at-arms, along with an unexpected figure, Sheriff Morgan. We've got a problem, Morgan said without preamble. Cross isn't just coming for a routine inspection. He's moving his entire operation here permanently. Why? Jake asked, though he was already piecing it together. Granite spoke. Pine Creek's perfect, remote, controlled local government, easy access to shipping lanes, but that's not the real reason. He handed Jake a folder. Our contacts spotted these guys arriving at the private airstrip outside town. The surveillance photos showed familiar faces, members of the same trafficking network Jake had encountered in Myanmar, the operation that had gone wrong. They're consolidating, Jake muttered, using the Red Wolves as cover for a major distribution hub. It gets worse, Morgan added. Harbor Master Richards called an emergency board meeting tonight. They're voting to slash the Marine Patrol budget by 60%. I'll have to lay off half my deputies, including Chen. Clearing the board, Jake concluded, making sure there's no official resistance. Granite nodded grimly. Cross arrives in 3 days. Marcus's boys are already setting up additional security. Whatever they're planning, it's big. Jake studied the photos again. They'd be expecting trouble from law enforcement, maybe rival gangs, but they wouldn't be looking for a special forces operation. Not exactly, Morgan corrected, a slight smile playing at her lips. Not exactly. Jake raised an eyebrow. Granite smiled. Half my crew are former special forces, rangers, Marine recon, even a couple of Delta operators. We've kept it quiet, maintained our cover as just another MC, but we've got the training. Someone's got to watch out for the little guy, Granite replied with a shrug. The back door opened, and Chen stepped out, still in her deputy uniform. We've got movement. 3 Red Wolf trucks just left their compound headed for the warehouse district. They're moving things around, Jake said. consolidating their valuable assets where they can protect them better. He turned to Morgan. "Sheriff, I know you're trying to protect your people, but we're going to need some official cover for this." Morgan sighed heavily. "What did you have in mind?" "I need Chen and any deputies you trust completely to do some selective enforcement," Jake explained. "Traffic stops, license checks, anything to slow down their movements and gather intel." "They'll complain to Richards," Morgan warned. "Let them. It'll make them sloppy, paranoid." He turned to Granite. "I need your people to start pressure testing their security. Nothing obvious, just enough to keep them looking in the wrong direction." Granite grinned. "Already started. My boys ran a few bikes past their checkpoints earlier. Got them all spun up about potential rivals moving in." "Good. They'll be expecting gang warfare. They won't be looking for a surgical strike." Jake pulled out his phone, showing them Mike's satellite imagery. "We've got 3 days to map their security, identify vulnerabilities, and set up for the main event." "And what exactly is the main event?" Chen asked, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "We're going to let Cross set up his operation exactly as planned. Let him bring in his international contacts, his whole network." Jake smiled coldly. "And then we're going to take it all down at once." "But we'll need one more piece of the puzzle," Morgan said. "What's that?" "Evidence," Morgan replied. "Enough to bypass Richards and go straight to the feds. The kind of evidence that makes even corrupt politicians run for cover." Linda, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "I might be able to help with that." Everyone turned to look at her. "The bait shop's been here for 30 years. Everyone comes through here eventually, even people who think they're too important to be seen in a place like this. And everybody talks." Jake looked at the older woman with newfound respect. "You've been keeping track? Names, dates, conversations? I may be just a bait shop owner, but I'm not stupid." Linda pulled a worn leather notebook from her apron pocket. 7 years of notes. Everything from Richard's first meeting with the Red Wolves to which board members started living beyond their means. Granite let out a low whistle. "Ma'am, you might just be the most dangerous person here." "Meet back here tomorrow night," Jake instructed. "Granite, bring your best people. Sheriff, we'll need everything Linda's collected plus whatever your deputies can legally gather. We've got one shot at this." As the group dispersed, Linda touched Jake's arm. "You're not just doing this for the marina, are you? This is personal." Jake thought of his fallen teammates, of the mission that had gone wrong. Sometimes personal motivation just means you'll work harder to get it right. Back in his cabin, Jake spread out the intel, starting to form a plan. Cross had no idea he was walking into a trap 3 years in the making. He thought he was expanding his empire, but he was really stepping into a sniper's crosshair. His phone buzzed with a text from Mike. "Satellite shows more movement. Whatever they're planning, it's massive. Watch your 6. Jake sent back a simple reply. "Don't worry. This time we're ready for them." The next morning brought tense activity across the marina. Chen and the remaining trusted deputies conducted strategic traffic stops on Red Wolf vehicles, while Mountain Rangers members made their presence known through carefully orchestrated drive-bys of gang territory. Jake sat at his usual spot in the Rusty Hook, watching Marcus and 2 of his lieutenants arguing intensely across the parking lot. Their frustration was visible even from a distance. "Your coffee's getting cold," Linda said, sliding into the booth across from him. She placed her worn notebook on the table. "Here's everything I've got on Richards and his cronies. 7 years of notes, conversations, meetings that weren't supposed to happen." Jake flipped through the pages, his expression hardening. "Linda, this is more than just wildlife smuggling. They've been laundering money through half the businesses in the marina. Why do you think I started keeping track? My herald, God rest his soul, always said knowledge was power. When he passed and they started pressuring me to sell the bait shop, I knew I needed insurance." A commotion outside drew their attention. Marcus was shoving one of his own men against a truck, clearly enraged. The pressure was getting to them. Jake's phone buzzed, a message from Granite. "Package secured. Meet at the old fish processing plant." "I need to go," Jake told Linda. "Stay alert. Things are going to get tense before they get better." The abandoned fish processing plant sat at the edge of the marina. its rusted equipment serving as silent sentinels. Jake found Granite and his core team waiting inside, along with an unexpected guest, a bound and gagged red wolf prospect. "Found him snooping around our territory," Granite explained. "Figured he might have something interesting to share." Jake approached the terrified prospect. He recognized him, one of the newer recruits, barely old enough to drink. "What's your name, kid?" "Tommy," he stammered after Granite removed the gag. "All right, Tommy, let's talk about the shipment coming in with Cross." "I don't know anything about—" Tommy began. "Save it," Jake cut him off. "You're wearing a prospect cut, which means you do the grunt work. Loading, unloading, keeping watch. You know things. The question is, are you willing to share those things, or do we have to get creative?" The young man swallowed hard. "They'll kill me." "Kid," Granite growled, "what do you think they'll do when they find out you got caught on our turf?" Tommy broke. The words poured out. Shipping schedules, guard rotations, the layout of the compound. But it was his last piece of information that made Jake's blood run cold. "They've got some kind of ledger," Tommy said. "Records of every animal, every buyer, every payoff. Cross is bringing it personally. Marcus said it's worth more than all the smuggled cargo combined." Jake and Granite exchanged looks. A ledger like that could expose entire trafficking networks, reveal every corrupt official on Cross's payroll. "One more thing," Tommy added, his voice shaking. "They know someone's working against them. Marcus called in extra muscle, professional guys, not just bikers." Jake's phone buzzed again. "Chen. Problem. Richards just suspended Morgan, named Marcus's brother as interim sheriff." "Put him somewhere safe," Jake told Granite, nodding toward Tommy. "He might be useful later." Back at the Rusty Hook, Jake found Chen waiting with Morgan and Linda. The former sheriff looked defeated. "They're moving faster than we expected," Morgan said. "Richards called it a routine administrative review, but we all know what this means. With Morgan out and legitimate law enforcement compromised, we've lost our official cover," Chen added. Jake's phone buzzed yet again. "Mike. Satellite shows major movement. Multiple vehicles converging on your location. Professional operators, not gang members. Watch yourself." As if on cue, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows rolled slowly past the bait shop. "They're not even trying to be subtle anymore," Chen muttered. "They don't need to be," Jake replied. "They think they've got control of the marina. That makes them confident. Confidence makes them sloppy." Linda watched the SUVs disappear around the corner. "What do we do now?" "We change the plan," Jake said firmly. "They're expecting resistance from law enforcement or rival gangs, so we give them exactly what they're watching for while we hit them from a direction they'll never see coming." "The mountain rangers?" Morgan asked. "Part of it, but we've got another card to play." Jake pulled out his phone, dialing Mike. "Remember that favor you owe me? I need satellite coverage real time, and I need you to make some calls. It's time to wake up some old ghosts." As night fell over the marina, more black SUVs arrived. Professional mercenaries mixed with Red Wolf members, setting up checkpoints and patrol routes. They were preparing for war, but they were preparing for the wrong kind of fight. In the basement of the Rusty Hook, Jake laid out the revised plan to his core team. The mountain rangers would play their part, making noise and drawing attention. Chen and Morgan would work their remaining law enforcement contacts. Linda's evidence would be their insurance policy. "But the operation that will end this," Jake explained, "will come from the shadows, executed by people who specialize in the impossible." "Tomorrow," Jake told them, "Cross arrives with his precious ledger and his international contacts. He's expecting to find a marina under his complete control. Instead, he's going to find out what happens when you underestimate the wrong people." Outside, thunder rolled across the water. A storm was coming to Pine Creek Marina. By the time it was over, nothing would be the same. Jake's phone lit up with a series of encrypted messages. The first was from Mike. "Ghost team activated. 6 operators, all former teammates. They're yours if you want them." The second was from an unknown number. "Captain, Ghost lead here. Team is in position awaiting your orders." The third was from Granite. "My people report Cross's advance team doing recon. They're thorough, professional. These aren't regular muscle." Jake gathered his team closer. Listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. In about 6 hours, Cross and his people are going to execute what they think is a perfect takeover of this marina. They have the numbers, the weapons, and the tactical advantage. He spread out a detailed map of Pine Creek Marina. What they don't have is an understanding of who they're really fighting. They're watching the streets, the obvious approaches. They've got eyes on law enforcement, on the mountain rangers, on anyone they think might resist. A cold smile crossed his face. But they're not watching the shadows, and that's where we're going to hurt them. The ghost team? Chen asked quietly. They're real, Jake nodded. 6 operators, all former special forces, people who've worked the deadliest missions imaginable. They've been in position since yesterday, mapping patrol routes, identifying vulnerabilities. Morgan studied the map. Even with them, we're still outnumbered. Numbers don't win fights, Jake replied. Position, timing, and initiative do. Besides, we're not looking to win a straight fight. Linda spread out her notebook. I've marked every business they're using to launder money, every warehouse where they store contraband. If we hit them all at once, chaos, Granite finished. They won't know where to focus their response. Jake's phone buzzed again. Mike. Final satellite pass shows Cross's convoy mobilizing. Multiple vehicles, heavy security. ETA 0600. Perfect, Jake said. That gives us 5 hours to get everything in place. He turned to his team. Granite, get your people ready. Chen, Morgan, coordinate with the ghost team's recon. Linda, the older woman smiled. Stay out of sight and let the professionals work? Actually, Jake said, I need you to open the bait shop at the usual time. Act normal. Cross's people will be watching. If anything's different, they'll know something's wrong. Linda straightened her apron. Honey, I've been serving coffee to criminals for years while gathering evidence against them. I think I can handle one more morning. Thunder crashed outside as Jake checked his weapons one final time. Remember, he told his team, we're not just defending, we're hunting. These people came to our home thinking we'd be easy prey. Let's show them what happens when predators become prey. The rain intensified as enemy operators moved through the darkened marina. Their night vision equipment gave them confidence, but Jake knew it would also be their weakness. They were looking through a digital green haze while his people knew every shadow by heart. Ghost lead, status, Jake whispered into his radio. First team moving into the kill zone. 20 operators moving in 4-man cells. Heavy weapons, demo gear. Stone, mountain rangers in position. Ready to create chaos on your mark. Jake watched through his scope as the enemy's lead element approached the rusty hook. They moved well, covering angles, checking corners. Professional, dangerous, but predictable. Execute Phase 2, he ordered. Across the marina, the mountain rangers roared to life, their motorcycles thundering through the docks in what appeared to be a panicked evacuation. The enemy operators reacted exactly as trained, splitting their forces to investigate the new threat. Ghost 2, report. Second convoy moving to intercept the bikers. Chen, now. From her position at the old sheriff's office, Chen triggered the prepared devices. Strategic transformers blew, plunging new sections of the marina into darkness while illuminating others. The enemy's night vision equipment suddenly became a liability as they dealt with rapidly changing light conditions. Multiple targets disoriented, Ghost 3 confirmed. Moving to engage. The first shots were silent, suppressed weapons taking out key targets in the enemy's command structure. By the time they realized they were under attack, the Ghost team had already melted away to new positions. Commander, Mike's voice came through his earpiece. Third convoy is holding back. Their commander's smart. He's realized something's wrong. Good, Jake replied. That's what the package is for. On cue, he transmitted a burst of encrypted data, the fake ledger, from a location near the center of the marina. As predicted, the enemy electronic warfare team picked it up. They're moving, Ghost Lead reported. All units converging on the transmission source. Jake smiled grimly. Phase 3. All units execute at will. The storm above provided perfect cover as the real battle began. The mountain rangers abandoned their decoy run, instead launching coordinated attacks on the enemy's vehicles. Ghost team operators picked off anyone who tried to call for backup or establish a command position, but it was the marina's people who proved most effective. Every door that looked like an escape route led to a prepared ambush. Every shadow concealed a defender who knew exactly where to shoot. The enemy operators found themselves fighting phantoms, never able to establish control or consolidate their forces. "Commander," Granite's voice was tight with controlled excitement, "they're falling back to preset rally points." "No," Jake ordered. "They're falling back to where we want them." The fake ledger data had led them straight into the marina's old boatyard, a maze of buildings rigged with motion sensors and prepared firing positions. As the enemy operators sought cover, they found themselves being herded into increasingly smaller spaces. Ghost team status? 15 targets eliminated, 20+ wounded. Rest are contained in the boatyard sector. Jake switched channels. "Mike, what's the third convoy doing?" "Finally moving in. Their commander must have realized his advance teams are being decimated." "Perfect. Chen, initiate final sequence." The remaining dock lights shut down completely, plunging the marina into total darkness. The storm above intensified, rain hammering down as lightning split the sky. Through his thermal scope, Jake watched the remaining enemy forces cluster together in the boatyard. Their training told them to consolidate, to establish a defensive position. Instead, they were doing exactly what he'd planned, gathering in one location. "All units be advised," Jake transmitted. "Phase 4 is active. I say again, Phase 4 is weapons-free." The remaining enemy operators never saw it coming. Ghost team snipers took out their leadership, mountain rangers cut off their escape routes, and the marina's defenders, led by Chen and Morgan, maintained a constant barrage that kept them pinned down. But it was Jake who would deliver the final blow, moving through the rain like a shadow as he approached the main boatyard building where the enemy commander had established his last position. The man who'd led the third convoy, the one who'd held back thinking he was smarter than the rest. Time to show him just how wrong he was. "All units hold position," he ordered. "This one's personal." Lightning flashed again as Jake moved toward the boatyard entrance. The real fight was about to begin. Lightning illuminated the interior as Jake moved silently through the shadows. His thermal scope revealed 6 heat signatures on the upper level, the enemy commander and his remaining elite team. "Ghost lead, maintain overwatch," he whispered. "No one leaves this building." "Copy that, Captain. We've got you covered." The boatyard floor was a maze of old equipment and storage crates. Perfect cover, but also perfect for ambush. Jake could hear the enemy team communicating in whispers, their voices carrying a familiar cadence. Former Special Forces, he realized. Navy SEALs who'd gone mercenary. "Commander," Mike's voice came through his earpiece. "Got an ID on their leader, Victor Viper Cross. He was in Myanmar." Jake's blood ran cold. Cross had been there the day his teammates died, working for a different contractor. He disappeared before anyone could question his role in the operation's failure. "So," Cross's voice echoed through the boatyard. "The famous Captain Harrison. Been a long time since Myanmar." "Not long enough, Viper." Jake moved between shadows, changing positions, still staying hidden. "Still hiding behind civilian casualties, Cross? Just like Myanmar?" A burst of gunfire replied, rounds impacting where he'd been seconds before. These weren't random shots. Cross's team was trying to herd him into a kill zone. "Myanmar was business," Cross called out. "Just like this is. You really think your little marina can stand against what's coming? The Red Wolves were just the beginning." "Ghost team, status on the other forces?" "Contained and neutralized. Mountain Rangers are running cleanup. Only targets remaining are in your building." "Hear that, Viper Idari," Jake replied. "Your backup isn't coming." More gunfire, more controlled this time. They were getting frustrated, making mistakes. "You don't get it, do you?" Cross's voice was closer now. "The Red Wolf organization wasn't the head of the snake. We are. That ledger contains everything. Every operation, every buyer, every contact. With that data, we control it all." Wrong, Jake replied, his voice echoing. You don't control anything. Not anymore. He triggered the devices Chen had planted earlier. Flashbangs detonated on the upper level, followed by smoke grenades. The enemy's night vision equipment became worse than useless as the boatyard filled with disorienting light and smoke. Ghost team, external threats? Negative, Captain. Building is secure. No reinforcements approaching. Jake moved upward, using the chaos to his advantage. The first operator never saw him coming. A quick strike to the throat, another to the temple, silent, efficient. The second tried to radio for help, but received only static. The marina's radio jammers were still active, cutting off all communication. It's over, Viper, Jake called out. Your men are dead or captured, your operation is blown. Surrender now, like your team surrendered in Myanmar. The taunt was meant to enrage him, make him sloppy. Instead, it brought perfect clarity. Through the smoke and strobing lights, Jake moved like a ghost. The third and fourth operators fell to precise shots. The fifth managed to get off a burst of fire before Jake's knife found his throat. Then it was just him and Cross. You know what your problem is, Harrison? His voice was behind him now. You still think like a soldier. Honor, duty, protecting the innocent. The world doesn't work that way anymore. You're wrong. Jake turned, facing him. That's exactly how it works. You just forgot. They moved simultaneously. Cross was good, one of the best. His strikes were precise, powerful. But Jake had something he didn't, a reason to win that went beyond money or power. The fight was brutal and close. Bones cracked, blood flowed. Cross landed a crushing blow to his ribs, but Jake absorbed it, countering with a strike that shattered his knee. Ghost team status? He managed between breaths. Still clear, Captain. End this. As Cross stumbled, Jake saw his opening, the same move he'd used countless times in training, the one they taught every Special Forces operative. This is for Myanmar, he said, and struck. Cross's eyes widened as he fell, his last words barely a whisper. You don't know what you've done. Jake stood over him, breathing hard. Actually, I do. Mike uploading now. The real ledger downloaded from their servers while they were chasing our decoy. Jake spoke into his radio, standing over Cross's unconscious form. Every buyer, every trafficking route, currently being transmitted to every major wildlife protection agency worldwide. The storm outside was finally passing, dawn breaking over Pine Creek Marina. Through his thermal scope, Jake could see the rest of Cross's team being rounded up by the ghost operators and mountain rangers. The red wolves who hadn't fled were surrendering, realizing their protection had evaporated. Commander, Ghost Lead's voice crackled through his radio. We've secured the storage facilities, found something interesting. Shipping manifests, bank records, political payoffs. Goes way beyond wildlife trafficking. Jake moved to secure Cross, zip-tying his hands. How deep? State level, at least, maybe higher. Cross wasn't lying about one thing, this was bigger than the Red Wolves. Chen's voice joined the channel. Jake, we've got movement at the harbor master's office. Richards and half the board are trying to leave town. Morgan's team has them contained. Keep them there. The federal wildlife agents will want to talk to them. Jake keyed his radio again. Granite, status on the docks? Clean. My boys are running security with the remaining deputies. Marina's locked down tight. No one in or out without us knowing. Jake did one final sweep of the boatyard, gathering any intelligence they might have missed. In Cross's jacket, he found a phone with multiple encrypted channels and a small notebook filled with codes, more evidence for the federal authorities to unravel. Linda's voice came unexpectedly over the radio. They'd given her a spare unit to stay in contact. Honey, you might want to get back to the Rusty Hook. We've got company. Hostile? Unless the Fish and Wildlife Service has gotten a lot more aggressive since I last checked, I'd say friendly. About a dozen agents in suits looking very official. Their boss says she knows you. Rodriguez, Jake smiled. Special Agent Rodriguez had been his contact during the Myanmar operation. Tell her I'll be there in 10. And Linda, put some coffee on. It's going to be a long morning. The scene at the Rusty Hook was almost surreal. Federal agents mingled with Mountain Rangers members, deputies chatted with ghost team operators who'd already changed into civilian clothes, and Linda moved through it all with pots of coffee and plates of her famous blueberry pancakes. "Captain Harrison," Rodriguez greeted him with a professional nod. Or should I say the retired captain, who somehow managed to expose a multinational wildlife trafficking ring from a small marina bait shop? Just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Rodriguez smiled. Right. And I suppose the highly trained operators who helped take down Cross's organization just happened to be passing through? Or the fact that the Mountain Rangers MC is actually a cover for former Special Forces operators? Granite, who'd just walked in, laughed. "Ma'am, sometimes the best way to hide is in plain sight. Nobody looks twice at another motorcycle club." "We've been tracking Cross for years," Rodriguez continued, spreading files across the counter. "Could never get close enough. Then you show up, start trouble with a local gang, and within a week his entire operation falls apart. Want to explain that?" Jake accepted a cup of coffee from Linda. "Sometimes bullies need to learn they picked the wrong target. The ledger you transmitted, it's already causing waves. Trafficking networks worldwide are scrambling. Corrupt officials are resigning. We've got enough evidence to take down organizations we didn't even know existed." Morgan joined them, looking tired but satisfied. Richards and the board are singing like canaries. Turns out they've been on Cross's payroll for years, helping him set up shell companies looking the other way while he built his operation. "The Red Wolves?" Jake asked. "Most of the rank and file are in custody," Chen reported. "Marcus and his inner circle tried to run, but the Mountain Rangers intercepted them at the county line. They're feeling chatty too, especially after we showed them the evidence Linda collected." Linda smiled innocently. "Amazing what people will say when they think the old bait shop owner isn't paying attention." Rodriguez shook her head in admiration. "A Special Forces captain, a motorcycle club full of Spec Ops veterans, a sheriff's deputy, and a bait shop owner with a secret notebook. Sounds like the beginning of a bad joke." "Sometimes the best operations come from unlikely alliances," Jake replied. "Speaking of operations," Rodriguez lowered her voice. "That ghost team of yours, any chance they're interested in more work? We've got other trafficking enterprises that could use their attention." "You'd have to ask them," Jake smiled, "if you can find them." The ghost operators had already disappeared, leaving no trace of their presence. They'd return to their normal lives until the next time they were needed. It was their way. Through the bait shop windows, Jake could see Pine Creek Marina coming back to life. The morning sun revealed some damage from the night's fighting, but nothing that couldn't be repaired. More importantly, he saw locals walking the docks without fear, holding their heads high. "What happens now?" Linda asked, refilling coffee cups. "Now," Morgan said, "we rebuild. Proper law enforcement, legitimate business development. Do things right." "Already got calls from neighboring marinas," Granite added. "Seems word's spreading about what happened here. Other communities dealing with similar problems looking for help." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Looking for help or looking for hope?" "Both, probably," Chen answered. "People need to know they can stand up to bullies, that they don't have to live in fear." "And if they need more than just hope?" Rodriguez asked pointedly. Jake looked around the bait shop at Linda's quiet strength, Morgan's dedication, Chen's determination, Granite's professionalism. A team that had come together by chance but had proven more effective than any official task force. "Then they'll find it," he said finally. "One way or another." His phone buzzed with a message from Mike. "Satellite tracking shows similar operations setting up in 3 other coastal marinas. Ghost team standing by if needed." Jake smiled. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. But this time, he wasn't facing it alone. He had a team, a purpose, and a home worth protecting. "Linda," he called out, "better stock up on coffee. Something tells me your bait shop's going to stay busy." Linda winked. "Honey, my coffee pot's always ready, and my notebook's got plenty of blank pages left. After all, somebody's got to keep track of what really happens in these small marinas." Outside, the storm had passed completely. leaving behind a sky as clear as Jake's conscience. Cross and his operation were finished, but more importantly, Pine Creek Marina had found its strength. The marina would never be the same. It would be better. 3 months after the takedown of Cross's operation, the Rusty Hook was busier than ever. The basement, once a simple storage space, had been renovated into what Linda jokingly called the Situation Room, a secure meeting place for Jake and his expanding network of allies. Jake sat at his usual booth reviewing reports from Granite's teams about suspicious activity along the coast. Chen, now officially appointed as Morgan's successor after her retirement, joined him with fresh coffee. "Got something interesting," Chen said, sliding a file across the table. "Remember those warehouse raids last week? Found documentation linking 3 state officials to Cross's old network. They're scrambling since the ledger went public." Jake's attention shifted to the TV mounted in the corner, showing footage of another high-profile arrest, a wildlife trafficker with connections to Cross, taken down in a neighboring state by unknown operators. He smiled, recognizing Ghost Team's handiwork. "Your friends have been busy," Chen commented. "What friends?" "I just see effective law enforcement at work." The bait shop's door chimed as Morgan entered with Granite and Rodriguez, all looking serious. "Problem?" Jake asked. Rodriguez placed a laptop on the table, showing surveillance photos. "Remember how we thought Cross's operation was just about exotic animals? Turns out that was just the surface. We found evidence of broader trafficking routes using the same corridors, multiple small marinas involved. Local officials bought off," Morgan added. "Sound familiar?" Jake studied the photos. The pattern was clear, the same methods Cross had used now being employed by others trying to fill the power vacuum. "How many marinas?" he asked. "At least 6 that we know of," Granite replied. "All small, isolated, vulnerable. Just like Pine Creek was." Linda appeared with more coffee and her infamous blueberry muffins. "Sounds like someone should do something about that." "Already happening," Rodriguez said. "Federal task force is being assembled. Very unofficial, very deniable. They're looking for someone to coordinate ground operations." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, you recommended someone?" "Actually," Granite interjected, "we all did. The Mountain Rangers need direction for their more specialized operations. Ghost Team operates better with familiar command, and having a marina security consultant provides useful cover. Plus," Linda added, "you need something to do between teaching those self-defense classes." The classes had been Jake's idea, helping locals protect themselves, building confidence and community. The waiting list was now 3 months long. "What about here?" Jake asked. "This marina still needs protecting." Chen smiled. "We've learned a few things. Besides, you won't be far. Just expanding the definition of home territory." Jake's phone buzzed with a message from Mike. "Got movement on those trafficking cases, time sensitive. Team standing by for your call." He looked around at his unlikely family. Linda's quiet strength, Chen's determined leadership, Morgan's steady wisdom, Granite's tactical expertise, Rodriguez's official backing. All part of something larger now, a network dedicated to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. "You know what the real problem was with Cross and operations like his?" Jake said, studying the surveillance photos. "They prey on marinas like Pine Creek because they think small communities are weak. They mistake kindness for weakness, quiet for cowardice. They forget that small marinas are built on community," Linda added, refilling coffee cups, "on people looking out for each other." "Exactly," Jake continued. "Cross thought he could control this marina through fear and corruption. He never understood that real strength doesn't come from having the most guns or the most money. It comes from people standing together." Chen finished. "And now other marinas need to learn that same lesson." Jake's phone buzzed again. This time a message from Ghost Lead. "Team assembled. Multiple targets identified. Awaiting your command." Outside, a group of mountain rangers rode past on patrol, their presence now a comfort to the locals rather than a source of fear. Through the bait shop windows, Jake could see Pine Creek thriving, businesses reopening, families walking without fear, community returning stronger than ever. You know what I learned in the Special Forces? Jake said, looking at his team. The most effective operations aren't always about having the biggest force or the most advanced equipment. Sometimes it's about having the right people in the right place, working together for the right reasons. And now other marinas need that same lesson, Rodriguez added. Jake nodded. Cross and his people thought small marinas were easy targets. They were wrong about Pine Creek, and we're going to make sure they're wrong about these other locations too. Expanding operations will be complicated, Granite warned. We'll need more resources, more coordination. Good thing we've got a bait shop with a secure basement, he smiled, and plenty of coffee. And good thing we've got people who know how to move in the shadows, Chen added, nodding to where a ghost team member sat quietly in the corner, blending in perfectly with the morning crowd. Jake's phone lit up with multiple messages. Mike, satellite coverage confirmed for next operation. Ghost lead. Teams in position at 3 locations. Granite. Mountain Rangers ready to move. Rodriguez. Federal backup standing by, off the books. Well, Jake said, opening his laptop, show me what we know about these marinas. Let's help them like we helped Pine Creek. Linda placed a fresh slice of pie in front of him. Just remember, honey, no matter how far you roam, you've always got a home base here. My coffee pot's always on. And my notebook's got plenty of blank pages, she added with a wink. Jake smiled. The fight wasn't over. It was evolving, growing. But now he had something he'd never had before. A true team, a clear purpose, and a home worth fighting for. Cross had thought he was building an empire, but he'd actually helped create something far more powerful. A network of people dedicated to protecting the vulnerable and standing up to bullies wherever they appeared. All right, Jake said, addressing his team. Let's get to work. We've got some marinas to save. The sun was setting over Pine Creek when Mike's emergency alert came through. Major operation forming in Cedar Point Marina. Pattern matches Cross's playbook. Multiple hostile forces converging. Local law enforcement compromised. Jake studied the satellite imagery Mike had sent. Cedar Point was 3 hours north, another small coastal marina, population 3,000. Isolated, vulnerable, perfect target for criminal enterprises looking to establish new territory. What do we know? Jake asked during the emergency briefing in the Rusty Hook's basement. Rodriguez pulled up files on the screen. Marina's been seeing increased criminal activity over the past month. Gang called the Night Hunters moved in first, started with the usual protection rackets. Now we're seeing the same signs we saw here. Corrupt officials, suspicious shipping activity, unexplained wealth. They're following Cross's template exactly, Granite observed, using the gang as cover while they set up the real operation. Jake's phone buzzed again. Ghost lead. Advanced team in position, confirming heavy enemy presence. At least 40 operators, well-equipped. They're expecting resistance. Good, Jake said. Let's give them more than they expect. Granite, Mountain Rangers can be ready in 2 hours. 15 riders, all combat veterans. Chen, I can spare 6 deputies, all trained in the new protocols. Rodriguez? Unofficial federal backing as usual. And I've got 3 teams of agents who'd love to accidentally be in the right place at the right time. Jake nodded, formulating the plan. They're expecting conventional resistance, local law enforcement, maybe rival gangs. We give them what they're expecting. Let them think they've got everything under control. Meanwhile, Chen finished, Ghost team hits them from the shadows. Linda, contact the local bait shop owner, tell them to be ready but stay safe. Their evidence will be crucial later. Already did, honey. She's smarter than they think, just like someone else I know. Jake spread out a map of Cedar Point Marina. They've got numbers and equipment, but we've got something better. Experience. We know their playbook because we've seen it before. More importantly, we know how to beat it. His phone lit up with messages from the team. Mike. Satellite coverage confirmed, full monitoring package. Ghost lead. Target packages identified, awaiting go order. Granite. Mountain Rangers rolling, ETA 3 hours. Chen. Deputies mobile, moving in civilian vehicles. Remember, Jake addressed his team, these people think small marinas are easy targets. They think they can walk in, spy a few officials, intimidate the locals, and take control. They're about to learn the same lesson Cross learned. Speaking of lessons, Linda added, the night hunters have been pressuring local businesses, pushing people around. Sounds like they need a reminder about picking the wrong targets. Jake smiled. Then let's give them one they won't forget. Through the windows, he watched the last light fade over Pine Creek Marina. Somewhere north, Cedar Point was about to learn they weren't alone anymore, and the people trying to take over their marina were about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating small communities and the people who protected them. Ready to save another marina? Chen asked, checking her gear. Jake smiled, thinking of that morning in the Rusty Hook that seemed so long ago. Always ready, because someone has to remind these bullies why they should be careful who they pick fights with. And why, Linda added, serving a final round of coffee. They should always think twice before causing trouble in a small marina. 1 year after the confrontation that started it all at the Rusty Hook bait shop, Jake stood at his usual window booth watching the morning fog roll in from the water. The marina had changed in ways he never expected. Pine Creek had become more than just a quiet coastal community. It had become a symbol of hope for small marinas everywhere. Linda approached with fresh coffee, just like she had that fateful morning. Penny for your thoughts? Just thinking about how it all started, Jake replied. 3 red wolves who thought they could intimidate a bait shop owner and found a special forces captain instead. Linda smiled. Though I suspect they weren't the last ones to make that mistake. Jake's phone buzzed with the morning intelligence briefing from Mike. In the past year, their network had disrupted criminal operations in 12 coastal marinas, dismantled 4 major trafficking rings, and exposed dozens of corrupt officials. The Ghost Team had become legendary among criminal circles, an invisible force that struck without warning, protecting small communities from those who would prey on them. Got something interesting, Chen said, sliding into the booth. Now a seasoned sheriff, she'd helped train law enforcement in other marinas, teaching them how to resist corruption and stand against intimidation. Remember those files we found in Cedar Point? Finally finished decrypting them. What did you find? Names, dates, locations. Turns out Cross wasn't just building a criminal empire. He was creating a template, a way for others to target and take over small marinas systematically. Granite entered the bait shop, followed by Morgan and Rodriguez. The Mountain Rangers leader looked serious. That explains what we're seeing up and down the coast. Different groups, same playbook. They're learning, Rodriguez added, spreading surveillance photos across the table. After what happened here, in Cedar Point and Silver Harbor, they're getting more careful, operating in smaller groups, staying mobile, but still targeting small marinas. Still thinking they can control communities through fear and corruption, Morgan observed. Jake studied the photos. The patterns were clear. Criminal organizations adapting their methods but still underestimating the strength of small communities. Still making the same fundamental mistake that Cross and the Red Wolves had made. They're not the only ones who've learned, Jake said. Every marina we help becomes stronger. Every community that stands up becomes an example for others. His phone lit up with multiple messages. Ghost lead. New activity detected in 3 coastal locations. Granite. Scouts report suspicious movement in harbors north of here. Mike. Satellite shows pattern matching Cross's template. Linda refreshed their coffee cups. Looks like some people still need to learn the hard way. They never understand, Chen said. They see small marinas as easy targets. They never expect to find people like us waiting for them. That's their biggest mistake, Jake replied. They think they can walk into any small marina, throw their weight around, and take control. They never realize that these communities have their own strength, their own protectors. Rodriguez checked her secure phone. Fish and Wildlife's been tracking increased criminal activity along the coast. They're getting organized, sharing resources. Good, Granite smiled. Makes them easier to find. Jake stood, moving to the window. Outside, Pine Creek Marina was alive with morning activity. Families walked without fear, businesses thrived, and the community had grown stronger than ever. The Red Wolves were gone, their attempted takeover now just a story told in Linda's notebook. You know what the real difference is, Jake asked, between us and them? Besides the fact that we're the good guys? Chen quipped. They see small marinas as targets. We see them as home. They think they can control communities through fear. We know that real strength comes from people standing together. His phone buzzed again, this time from Carol at Silver Harbor Marina. Strange boats in the harbor. New gang trying to move in. Remember how you helped us? Never ends, does it? Morgan observed. It's not supposed to, Jake replied. As long as there are people who think they can prey on small marinas, we'll be here to prove them wrong. Linda appeared with a fresh pot of coffee and her infamous blueberry pie. Well then, guess we better fuel up. Sounds like we've got more bullies to teach some manners to. You know what I've learned this past year? Jake said, looking at his team. That morning when those red wolves walked in, they thought they were just picking on a lone man in a bait shop. They never realized they were starting something much bigger. A network, Chen added. A mission, Granite continued. A family, Linda finished. Jake's phone lit up with final confirmation from Ghost Lead. Teams in position at all 3 locations, awaiting your command. He looked around at his unlikely family, the bait shop owner who'd started it all, the sheriff who'd found her courage, the mountain rangers leader who'd become a trusted ally, the federal agent who'd chosen to fight from the shadows, and all the others who'd joined their cause. Well then, Jake said, checking his weapon. Let's go remind some people why you should always be careful who you pick a fight with in small marinas. And why, Linda added with a knowing smile, the quiet guy drinking coffee might just be the most dangerous person in the room. Outside, engines roared to life as the team prepared to move out. Somewhere along the coast, other small marinas were waiting for help, for hope, for someone to show them they weren't alone. And Jake's team would be there, just as they had been since that morning when 3 red wolves made the mistake that changed everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.